Hello and welcome to this companion series to A.K. Warder's Grammar Guide, An Introduction to Pali. Lesson 14 is a sizable chapter, and in this tutorial we'll cover three subjects: indefinite pronouns, the optative verb mood, and the ablative noun declension. There are already some supplementary tutorials available for these, so I will keep this brief. This is Pali Studies on the Learn Pali channel. Okay, so we start with indefinite pronouns. First, let's be clear what we're talking about. A pronoun is a word that is used to represent a substantive noun, and an indefinite pronoun is non-specific. That means it represents people, places, things or ideas without actually saying who or what they are. In English, these tend to be compound words, where the prefix is a form of any, some, every, or in the negative, no, in combination with body, one, or thing. So we get anybody, somebody, everybody, etc. And so you can see that what's been referred to is general or indefinite. Now, in Pali, an indefinite pronoun is made from a combination of the interrogative pronoun plus the indeclinable particle chi. And when these pronouns stand alone, they take the number and gender of the thing that they represent, even though they are indefinite. Whereas if they're acting as a pronominal adjective and qualifying another noun, they take the same gender, case and number of the noun that they qualify. The important thing to understand with these pronouns is that the chi suffix is indeclinable and doesn't change, but the interrogative part declines according to the function that it's playing in the sentence. Now, the keen-eyed among you may have spotted that pronouns which end with the pure nasal sound ng, the nigahita, when the particle chi is added, it changes to a palatal sound. So, king becomes kingchi. Also, another peculiarity of Pali is that if the particle chi is followed by a word beginning with a vowel, chi often becomes chid. In practice, though, this usually only happens in compound words. Now, I'm going to keep this section brief, as there is another tutorial on this, which includes examples. Moving on then to verbs and the optative verb mood. So first, it might be a good idea to demonstrate how English handles moods. If you recall, in English, tense is a combination of both time and aspect, that is, how complete an action is. And if you need a refresher, there's a tutorial appearing above now. In English, we create a mood, or possibly more accurately, a mode, by adding modal verbs to the present tense. So where the indicative mood is used to express a straight fact, as the name suggests, the optative implies something which is optional, that is, something which is possible, probable, or just hypothetical. So in English, the optative mode of expression is a present tense construction created by the use of modal verbs like may, would, could, or might. Now in Pali, as in English, this mood belongs to the present tense, and so it's formed on the present stem of the verb. Both the passive and causative secondary variants can be found, but as far as I'm aware, not the past or the future. The inflectional paradigm of the optative is a little complicated as it's derived in several ways, but the basic form is to drop the final vowel of the stem and add the optative infix eya. And to this new verbal base, the present tense personal endings are applied. But there are several contractions and variant forms, and most grammar guides capture these in just the one table. and the order of the endings in this table are roughly aligned with relative frequency. Most verbs form their optative by means of one of these endings. But there are some irregular forms, most notably from the verb us, to be, and this root has two variants, with the most common being that of asa. In fact, I think the sia version is only found in poetry. And there are some other variant forms which it's worth being aware of. To the stem karo, meaning to do, forms with the irregular infix ia can be found, and these frequently metathesize, which means the r and the y sounds swap around. And similar to this, some stems take ya, and when the stem vowel is dropped, the y sound assimilates with the final consonant, resulting in a double consonant. And there are also some variants with ye as an infix. So the optative forms are actually many and varied. And bear in mind that the terms would, could, may, might have to be chosen based on context, and these that I'm showing are just examples. Now we've had a look at how it's formed, let's move on and see how it's used. Its main use is to express potential, which covers probability or hypothesis. For instance, this might be the path to awakening. But it also covers wishes and desires, such as may I obtain going forth. And this is especially true of the first person. Quite often, the optative is found in if-then type statements to express possibility. If he would cook, then I may eat. The optative is used here to express a degree of uncertainty, the statement being hypothetical. A conditional sentence like this, not to be confused with the conditional mood, takes the form of if X, then Y. The clause expressing the condition in Pali is introduced by an indeclinable particle such as satche, che, which is also enclitic, which means it won't be the first word in the clause, and yadi or yang. The main clause then usually expresses the result, either fulfillment or failure. And in Pali, such conditional sentences broadly divide into three types: those which express certainties or truths, those which are hypothetical what-if types, and counterfactual or non-realised outcomes. And I give some loose English examples here. Now, as Warder alludes to, the verb tense or mood used in each clause bears some relation to the certainty of the outcome, the optative verb being mainly used for hypothetical or uncertain statements. But if the result is more certain, then present tense or sometimes future tense verbs are preferred. Whereas if the outcome is not possible or counterfactual even, then the optative verb in conjunction with a conditional mood verb is favoured. And you'll have to wait, I think, until lesson 29 for the conditional verb mood to be outlined. But it's actually quite rare, so don't worry too much. And I should stress here that this list isn't exhaustive. Although the tense of the two clauses tends to be the same, they can differ in order to create the required meaning. So that's conditionality. But the optative can also overlap with the mild imperative to form requests. You should go to the village. And also to express assent. He may ask a question. And even prohibitions can be formed. You should not say that. Okay, next we come to the ablative noun declension. The term ablative comes from the Latin ablatus, meaning to move away from or to be carried away. And essentially it indicates origin, separation, or cause. In Pali it's sometimes referred to as the fifth case, and its meaning is very similar to how English uses the preposition from. So let's first look at its formation. And we can see that the ablative declension coincides with the instrumental forms in the feminine and plural. It's only the masculine and neuter singular which have their own forms. And here it's the long A which is the most frequent. Note this table is just for A-stem nouns, and there's a slightly fuller look at the ablative formation in the tutorial appearing above now. And in addition to these forms, there's also an adverbial ablative suffix to, which can be added to any noun stem to create a singular ablative noun. Moving on now to look at how it's used. In essence, the ablative case expresses the point from which an action begins or emanates, as in, he goes from village to village. And similarly, it can imply separation. And it can also indicate withdrawal from, as in, abstaining from false speech, or release from, freed from bondage. Equally, it can indicate the source or origin of something. For instance, from desire is born grief. Fears arise from naivety. Or they weep from grief, meaning they weep out of grief. And these border on another important use of the ablative case, which is to express cause. So these could equally be fear arises due to naivety, or they weep due to grief. So we have to be careful, as for instance, viraga vimuchyati literally means out of dispassion he is released, and means due to dispassion he is released, and not from dispassion he is released. Well, Warder gives several other uses of the ablative, which I'm not going to go into here. Many of these are natural, considering that the ablative often expresses from, except to add that the ablative noun is sometimes used in comparisons, with the meaning better than sleep. But we'll cover this more in Lesson 18, when we'll look at comparative adjectives. And the last section on Taparissa compounds we covered in the previous lesson. So, that concludes Lesson 14. As always, there's more vocab, followed by Exercise 14. And there's a link to the answers to last week's exercise down in the description. In next week's lesson, we return to compound words.